It's time now to start with our post-break session. It is the second panel discussion that we're going to be having on the topic globalization of the workforce. Are we moving to the employers or the employees market? Once again, we have a very esteemed panel to discuss on the topics. Moderating the session, we have Mr. John Healy, board member Ciett. Ladies and gentlemen, request you all to kindly welcome Mr. John Healy up on stage. Joining him, we have esteemed panel, Mr. Dheeraj Kumar, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Employment. Ms. Annemarie Muntz, President Ciett. Mr. Anil Dhankher, Head HR, Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, India. Ms. Lenka, Kint, Executive Secretary, World Association of Public Employment Services. Mr. Sandeep, Dhir, Chief HRM, Tata Steel. And Ms. Linda Kromjong, Secretary General, International Organization of Employers. Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed panel for the second session, and now I hand over the floor to Mr. John Healy. The floor is all yours, John, now.
Well, I thank you very much. We're very excited to have this panel. I guess a couple things stand out to me. One, we're going to take a very international perspective as we look at things here. And two, I hope everyone recognizes the diversity that we bring to the stage here and the importance of that in the workforce segment. So with that, I'm going to hold off on any additional comments. Linda, I'm going to turn the stage over to you. And thank you.
Well, good morning all, and thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm supposed to operate PowerPoint slides. Can someone put them on screen? Thank you very much. I am the Secretary General of the International Organization of Employers, and we represent private sector in the world, representing over 155 employers' federation in over 145 countries. And we represent them with regards to social and labor policy, and that's exactly why I'm here today, because that is also what staffing industry is about. And we represent business within the UN system and within the International Labour Organization, but also in many other institutions and associations. We have also our company networks, 3 company networks, focusing on industrial relations and occupational safety and health. We've also got partner companies. I'm very happy to have Randstad, a Ciett member, as being one of my partners. So what we're doing is influencing the environment for doing business, making sure that business can do business in an environment that is favorable for them, and make sure that we have the right regulations in place to make sure that we can have sustainable job creation. I have 10 minutes. And I've asked John really to flag, when I reach my 10 minutes, so that we have enough time for the other panel members to really describe to you what are the key trends related to the globalization of the workforce. And I, of course, cannot live up to expectation here. 10 minutes is too short to address everything. But what I will do is that I will focus on the most relevant trends, on the topics that we will discuss here on this panel. And I will touch upon, what does local to global mean? What is diversity of jobs? What about increasing mobility? But also give my perspective to the title of this panel. Who is in the lead? Is it an employers or an employees market? If we look into from local to global, I think no one will deny that the world has become a village. People, goods and services travel the globe, and global trade is a creator of jobs. If I look only back to the generation of my parents, the world of work changed tremendously since then. And one thing we know for sure is that change will not stop, and it's even very likely that it will only increase more in speed. We have had great revolutions before, and these transformations have over time created more employment opportunities than it has destroyed, and it has overall pushed the overall living standards to new levels. The question that none of us can answer for now is whether the current revolution is different from what we have seen in the past, and how it will change the dynamics for both businesses and individuals. As already said in the introduction by Annemarie, we are in the middle of it. But as I'm an optimistic person, I think there's more opportunities than threats here. One trend I want to highlight here is a digitalization. Digital technologies have spread quickly, and the number of internet users has more than tripled in a decade, from 1 billion in 2005 to an estimated 3.2 billion at the end of 2015. And if you look at what we are using here in this room, internet is not sufficient. We're all using Twitter, we all on our mobile devices. That's how we communicate. And by having these digital technologies in place, the information base, the cost of delivering information has really gone down. We have increased the efficiency to access the labor market, and we have really created information as a force for good. And has facilitated searching, matching, and sharing of information, and contributed to greater organization and collaboration among economic agents. And it means that business, people, and governments are more connected than ever before. And where in the past it was about man following work, this is not necessarily anymore the case now. The impact on society, how we live together, how we connect with and support our families, is massive about this. And we together, business, government, and society, have the right ways to accommodate this change. If you look into the diversity of jobs, and it was already, I think we had great examples in the first panel on that one, is that in the past, when it was really said one started working in the same job as their parents or their family, and this is still the case in specific countries and regions. But for many of us sitting here in this room, it is very likely that what we are doing here is completely different from what our parents or our family did before. Only quite recently, no one had heard about jobs as shared service center industry. And today we have many shared services in India, and it's a big part of the economy. How we work together and the form we work has also changed. To simplify things, in the past we had two choices. You either started working for an employer or you became an entrepreneur. But now we have a broad variety of topics and options to name that we really can work together in. And this means you can be an employee, but you can be partly an entrepreneur, you can be an independent worker, you can be an agency worker, you can be self-employed, you can be part-time, and we use switch roles, when we go along. And it is even very likely that is the wanted position of many of the new kids that join the labor market in the future and already now. And what does it require from us? It requires flexibility, it requires agility, it requires adaptability of the workforce, but it also includes lifelong learning. We had a great example that learning is crucial in making sure you stay fit for purpose, in making sure that you increase productivity within companies. So workers and employees need to understand that they need to invest in themselves. And we as business will need to support that, as well as government, to make sure that we create an environment. We will never be perfect, and there will always be a mismatch between talents and jobs required there. But we have to make sure that we do our best to bridge the gap and make it as small as possible. Those who have the skills to leverage technology and can keep it with the speed of change, they will have an advantage. However, increasing numbers of workers are without social protection and minimum incomes, and lack the skills required or the jobs that are diminishing in demand, and this leads to social exclusion. If we look into mobility, as already mentioned before, in the past we had only one model: people followed the work. And that model is still there. Agriculture, mining industry, retail, you need to be there where the work has to be done. But there are many more sectors where a different model can be applied. And it's being already work in progress, as we would say. It's shared service already mentioned, banking industry. With new technology, it's perfectly possible to work from almost any place in the world. It does, however, require business to rethink their business model, and for HR and staffing industry to accommodate these business needs. But whether or not, is my mic still on? But whether or not we start looking now more and bringing work to the people, the numbers of mobility are huge. A McKinsey study showed 429 million international travels every year, 244 million people living outside their home country, 30 million cross-border workers, and 5 million students studying around the globe. And it doesn't even include the in-country mobility. And within India, as a huge country, this in-country mobility is a significant number. In countries with a diverse workforce, but also in business with a diverse workforce, it is proven that diversity adds to the bottom line, whether it's to economic growth from a GDP perspective, whether it's to the bottom line of a company. Diversity does make a difference, and therefore there is a clear business case to make sure that we have a more diverse workforce, not only because we've got lack of talent at a certain moment in time in certain countries, but also because it's what our customers and what our society demands from us. But we need to be aware of the unintended consequences. Ethical recruitment has become a key issue in the debate in the last years about responsible business conduct and responsible supply chain management. If I only mention Qatar and the FIFA World Cup, I think everyone understands why. So companies are stepping up. We need to have the right legislation in place here to deal with the migration, to make sure that we have fair recruitment principles in place. And companies are to engage in deep due diligence to identify those unintended adverse human rights impacts in their supply chain and to mitigate these risks if and when they occur. We also have to acknowledge here every company in the supply chain has its own responsibility. It's not only the M&E that has to do this. Who is in the lead? Well, that's, I think, a very difficult question to answer, but I will try to do my best. From a business perspective, I think there's a clear direction for HR and management to develop their talent pipelines and the future leaders, ensuring right people are at the right place at the right time to drive business success, to promote innovation, and to create jobs and increase competitiveness. The employment and recruitment industry is by tradition, coming from the past, business to business. And it has to continue in that way to support business in doing that. But the employment and recruitment industry has a challenging task also to accommodate the business to consumer part, to ensure it has access to the talents, understands their needs, and support the individual in their personal ambition, and offers a concept suitable for their needs at a specific point in time. In the previous panel, it was mentioned that, say, the intermediate role was shifting into, say, a career supporting role for temporary agency workers and all the forms of work, and that's where we're going into. But we have to recognize that governments and international institutions have a role to play in ensuring laws and regulations are made fit for purpose. There is existing legislation in place that is still fit for purpose for specific circumstances, but sometimes is lacking enforcement. But there's also a need to modernize employment regulations to reflect the changing nature of work, making sure we've got a business-friendly environment that stimulates economic growth and creates jobs, but doing that in balance with social progress, social protection, social security, and offering therefore the protection that workers also deserve. Employers' organizations are important multipliers. Employers raise awareness about responsible business conduct, build capacity of their members, companies, and serve as intermediaries between companies and public authorities. In the Bahrain Declaration of the Global Employers Community last year, we also reaffirmed our support to Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly Sustainable Development Goal 8, which called for sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and protective employment, and decent work for all, and also committed to promote the guiding principles on business and human rights, as well as the ILO M&E declarations. Many, I would say, food for thought, and I do hope that in the coming panel we will have, say, more in-depth discussions on the topics that I touch upon here now. Thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. Linda, thank you for getting us started so well there and setting the framework for what I hope is a very productive conversation here. And Shri Kumar, I want to turn to you for maybe a first comment. In some of the later comments made by Linda, she referenced the role of government in ensuring that the regulations that are established are fit for purpose. Here in India specifically, we know that we have the Contract Labor Act that is under active discussion here. We heard in earlier panels about some of the consolidation and simplification of law. Can you share with us a little bit about your view, not only of how it impacts India, but how it impacts the global companies who want to participate in the Indian economy and the Indian workers who want to participate in the global economy?
Thank you, and very good afternoon to all of you. Now, as we have heard in the inaugural session, as well as in the first session today, there are some action, some initiatives with respect to the regulation, with respect to the labor laws. Now, as it was being indicated in the previous session also, today we have a scenario where we have 43 central labor laws which are governing this space, and many of them are more than 50 years old, and some of them are even from pre-independence period. Definitely there has been a lot of change since the enactment of most of these laws, and there is a need to review them, to look at them again. And therefore, the government, particularly our Ministry of Labor and Employment, is now considering to consolidate these labor laws into 4 labor codes. And while this is being done, this would not be a mere consolidation, but also while doing this consolidation, simplify the processes, simplify the compliance mechanism, make the whole process more transparent, bring accountability in the enforcement system, and also ensure, very importantly, also ensure that there is rationalization which takes place, which takes into account the change in the economy, the change in the business system that has evolved, especially in our country, the change in the employer-employee relationship which has evolved during the last, let's say, 30 to 40 years in the country. So it should take into account all these things. And while we are doing this, the very important objective would be, and as if I can take from the first session, where I would say the very first, the basic outcome, the main outcome was put your workers, put your employees at the center. The main focus has to be on the workers and the employees. So taking from that, one of the main objectives of this entire process would be to ensure that the workers, their interest is properly protected. The 3 securities that we talk about, the employment security, the wage security, and the social security is ensured to them, which is again a big task, and also to facilitate the job creation, the employment generation, by making it easier to run a business. So that would be the overall objective of the entire process of this formulation of the 4 labor codes. It will, of course, remove the multiplicity, make it simpler even for the workers to understand where what provisions are, where which provision for me lies. Today, finding it in 43 labor laws, it's very difficult. So it would be much better, useful for the workers as well as for the employers. Now, coming very specifically to the point on the Contract Labor Act that you have asked. See, this legislation, Contract Labor Regulation and Prohibition Act, this was enacted in 1970. And again, it's about 45 years since it was enacted. There have been few amendments after that also. But then, as we said, that there have been a lot of changes and there is a need to review this act also. It has to take into account the today's situation, the today's aspiration of the workers and the demand of the society. So today again the government, our ministry is proposing to consider certain changes in the Contract Labour Act, which will take into account that the contract workers whose services are being offered to an establishment, their wages are protected properly. It is ensured that they get the wages properly. Their social security is protected. And at present, the Contract Labour Act, in fact, its scope is a little wider. The proposal is that let's focus it on those kind of people, those kind of agencies who are supplying manpower. Today's scope, if we read the act, is a little wider. So we want to make it focused on those agencies, those firms which are involved in supply of the manpower to an establishment, and also to ensure that these manpower staffing agency, they play their true role of an employer. They take the responsibility, and the process of registration is such that only the agencies who can ensure this role of protecting the wage, ensuring the social security, they get registered and they come into the play. So that would be one of the objectives of looking at the review of the law. As we have learnt also, the entire process of review has a lot of process, and we have also the process of tripartite consultation, consulting all the stakeholders. So all those things would be involved in this, but this is the direction in which we are looking at.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Lenka and Annemarie, I'm going to turn to the two of you for a comment in an area, and that's this whole question of the global and local side of things. As we start stretching things out, it would appear that many of the service providers, be they public or private, are starting to change some of the models that are available, how workers are being engaged, how they're delivering services into the customer base. As we try to address this new economy and the new world of work, what do you see, maybe first from a public side, Lenka, that we should really be focusing on? Yes, in the new world of work.
A lot of people are speaking about this new world of work, but at the end, we created it, yeah. We raised our kids in dialogue. So now it's obvious that they want to say something when they start working. It's a big difference with 20, 30, 40 years ago. So people now, young people, they want to not only to work, because in some countries it's obvious that you have a job. It's obvious that you can raise your kids. They want to have a little bit more of quality of life. And that's why, for example, they are asking to work from home. Whether the home is in the same country, the same city, or at the other side of the world, that doesn't change. We tried it out at the Secretariat. We are only with the 6 of us, ruling the world, kind of saying. And when somebody is lacking, it's a drama. And one of the staff, an assistant, she couldn't deal with the job and her household together. It was impossible. So she was always on sick leave. So at a certain point we decided, okay, one day in the week you will work from home. We know that at that moment, from 12 to 3, we can't phone her because she's busy with her kid, very little kid. But at the end, the result is that she is more motivated, more committed. Her health is really better because it was not doing like she was sick, she was really ill. So this kind of things are important, and I think the employers must take this into account. I was employer too, I took this into account, and it was a success. At the other hand, of course, the business must go on. So it's a question of dialogue, of explaining. For example, for this lady to remain very concrete, I told her, I trust you. The day I see I can't trust you, it's finished. And she knows it. It's her responsibility to do a good job. And it works very well already for some years. This is my first statement.
Great. Annemarie, from the private side of things, what are you seeing in terms of the models that are shifting in the marketplace?
Thank you, John. Yeah, well, Linda put a question to us, who's in the lead in this shifting era, changing world of work? And in fact, we are. And the we is employment services. Here I want to put public and private absolutely on the same level. We are leading in this changing world of work. And why? Because we are, and I think you had a nice word with that, the middleman. We are in the middle of the labor market. We offer to companies, to business, to organizations, our services, we offer it to workers. We are a B2B to C business. And we should profit from that. Looking at the changing balance. I would say, in general, employees, workers, are absolutely reaping the benefits, will get the benefits of globalization. They have, and we also just heard it, they have more choices. Some trade unions still say it's 9 to 5 and job for life, but actually people don't want that anymore, most of them. So more choices in terms of workplace, in terms of working time, in terms of countries, in terms of contracts. There's also more information, all these platforms, but more information is also more complexity. And that's again where we come in. We offer to simplify, decomplex, make the labor market transparent. And in making the labor market transparent, you also enhance the matching process. You offer efficiency, which will lead to better job matching, and even that leads to job creation. That to me is the worker side. And of course, on the worker side, I alluded to that this morning, there are also some people that lose their jobs. We see routine jobs being automated, and certainly the mid-skilled level losing their job. This is an absolute responsibility of society, public employment services, private employment services, governments, employers, unions, to see what we can offer to get those people back into the labor market, reskilling and upskilling. Looking at the shift to our clients. Clients are not looking for that, and that's so evident, but I'm saying it anyway, for this fulfillment of a one-temp job, peak or sick. They are looking for a total talent approach. They are looking for someone, again, to make this complex world of work simple, to offer them trusted advice. If you look at that side of things, 38% of in a recent research, 38% of companies said, I cannot fulfill vacancies. Why? Because people don't have the needed hard skills, often STEM-related science, technology, and engineering, mathematics. People don't have the right soft skills, something we should realize, critical thinking, analytical thinking. People lack experience, again, where we come in. Or people are not happy about wage levels. This is, again, our function, together with the public employment services, to try and better match. But in the future, it's certainly not about the matching only. We talked about it yesterday. It's about surfacing the whole downstream, the downstream where we start with the clients and what do you need and what do you need in the future, where's your enterprise going, what's the talent you need, surfacing the upstream, the talent What's your career? Where do you want to go? What skills do you want to enhance? What is lacking? And that whole process is broadening our service on the market as middlemen. Not only matching, but servicing the whole funnel, you could call it. For that, we need fit-for-purpose regulation. For that, we need cooperation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So now, Anil and Sandeep, we've got to turn this a little bit different. We've heard from the industry, we've heard from the government as business. Annemarie referenced making the complex simple. Anil, what do you need from the employment agencies? What do you need from the workforce? What do you need from the government to allow yourself to run your business and yield the results that you need? Not just fill orders, not just get bodies, not just get the hands, but to progress your business and improve the economy.
Okay, Healy, first, the issue on which we are talking in terms of how the work is changing, one example comes to my mind. First, I'll digress a bit and talk about that. First time when I joined Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank was going across for my induction to Abu Dhabi, and this Emirates Airlines was booked. There's a cab that came to pick me up, and I just started talking to that cab driver. And in the simple operation of moving, one person from my home to the airport, how many agencies were involved, and how many, who is the real customer, from that? I was just wondering at that point of time. So this my, office made that booking through a booking, agent. That is with Emirates. Emirates has hired a car company to provide that, cab. But this car company doesn't own that cab. It's financed by some Oryx or somebody else. And then this driver I was talking to, I said, whom do you belong to, with Oryx or with this car cab provider or Emirates? He said, no, I come from a temping services company. So who is who's customer? And you have to ensure that service standard which airlines like Emirates wants to. So this is how I would say a simple operation of transporting one person from point A to B, requires so many agencies to come together. And, coming back to your question in terms of from a government perspective, I think we need to understand that today technology is making, it possible to deliver that work or a service in a very different way, the way it was done a few years ago. People's aspiration, as you rightly said, they don't want to work. Many of them don't want to work that 9-to-5 job. They want, the flexibility. So, from a social perspective, that change is coming. However, as we interact, I think more than we did hear the minister speak in the morning. Quite a lot has been done from an administrative, again from a technology perspective, and EPFO is one of good examples. But having said that, is the attitude changing, and what can government do? Because on law side, I'm sure they will move from an administrative or from a process perspective, they will move, but yet to change, and that I think Mr. Mehra is sitting here, redesigning the airplane that he talked of. How do we transform these institutions internally, especially from a attitudinal point of view? I think that's the biggest challenge, and we need to address that, I would say. Thank you.
Good. So Sandeep, take it from your end. Tata Steel's grown massively as an organization, but often the work needs to come to where you need it done, or the workers need to come to where you need it done. As you've grown, how has the attitude of the worker, the different engagement models, how's that changed, and how's that changed the way you run your business?
Thank you. Well, to begin with, I would like to mention that Tata Steel is a 100+ years organization, and from the very beginning, we had policies that were pretty much employee friendly. So even in the early 1900s, when we came out with policies, it was much later that some of them got enacted as law. So to begin with, we started on that front. But as you mentioned, having grown global and the entire models changing with the disruptive innovation that digital has brought into the entire demographic, I think the issue, if I speak to the employee, he says times have changed. It is not about working hard, but it is about working smart. So it is the difference between working smarter versus working harder, and today's employees want to move towards the smarter way of working. their expectations have changed, and I think more has been mentioned in the previous session and now also. From a Tata Steel perspective, steel industry was traditionally considered to be a man's industry. So we had very few women work in the industry. But as things have changed, there are more women that we now employ. There are people, and in fact, we've taken one of our objectives is to double the number of women that we employ year on year going forward. So with a lot of women workforce coming into the picture, a lot of, I would say, couples, because earlier it was only one man in the family who used to be working. Today, it is the husband and the wife both are working, and they've got kids at home to support. They've got families to support. So a lot of flexibility in the policies is required. So we have come up with a lot of policies which are about work from home and mobility and so on and so forth. But importantly, if you look at the core business, you have to get people to work. If it is the making of steel that is concerned. But yes, there are a lot of corporate functions, the entire supply chain, and most of it which can move to the present day model and can be used for going forward. So I think that is where things are. Times are changing. Earlier we used to say we are the employer of choice and you need to come and join us. Today the times have changed. We need to go back and say you are a wonderful talent and I want you to join me. So that is where the shift is coming from. Thank you.
So that's a pretty bold statement that the workers now made the shift, and that you as an organization have seen that, well, your brand may be great. If you're not making an active effort to attract the talent, you're not going to get the talent that will differentiate your business. Very good. Do we have questions in the audience that would like for this team, this panel that's up here? Okay, then we'll continue along. Linda, you heard some comments from the team here. Anything stand out to you as really differentiating? I saw you scribbling some notes as people were making comments.
Well, I think everything that has been said here is absolutely spot on. I think you also, however, need to recognize that the people in this panel representing the business they represent, they're representing, say, well-developed businesses in a well-developed market very often. We have to recognize that not all markets are as developed, so sometimes the needs will be different. So it is, I would say, the challenge for businesses as it is for staffing agencies to really accommodate and make sure the model fits that developed market. We also need to recognize, and I think coming back to the flexibility that you offered in your example from working from home with Tata Steel, that the flexibility and what people require also changes, will not stay the same during their life cycle. And I think we also need to recognize that probably things move faster than we think, even in what we now call, say, emerging markets. And I just give one example about the telebanking, where, we use from going from paper banking to telebanking, and now we're using our iPhones. In Africa, they just skipped the entire telebanking step, and they immediately went into the iPhones, so smartphone banking. So I think maybe we underestimate the power, or say the tools and the techniques, and the young generations. And I'm not young either anymore. None of us here at this panel is. So maybe we should also ask, say, the younger people about what their perspective is, because sometimes I really feel it's important to really grab what they are thinking.
Thank you. It's wonderful. So it actually brought up an interesting point. If you go back to the conversation earlier this morning of how, as some of the early laws and early policy were established here in India, you followed the Japanese from a manufacturing perspective and looking at how things are. Shri Dheeraj, as you look at the change of what's happening inside, the way the workforce is engaging, people emigrating back, repatriating back to India, coming from different places, working in this gig economy. Are there different geographies, are there different markets around the world that you guys are trying to follow and specifically look at to benchmark against as you look at creating new policy?
Yeah, the jobs across, of course, across the border in other countries, they are part of our, let's say, uh, the vision, they are the part of our policy and the objective. And definitely here we have to see what is the talent pool, or let's say the capacity that we have in India, and what's the requirement in different parts of the world, and try to kind of match that. And in some of the places, as we can find that there have been a very good result. There have been very good, I would say, lot of opportunities for the job for the people from our country. They have been established, and we have benefited a lot. So that's part of the policy, and definitely the government and different departments are consciously working for that.
Annemarie or Lenka, as you look around the world and work with different organizations, different governments, are you seeing places that have found some magic in their policy to make it easier for business to find the talent that they need, to engage these different workforce models that are out there?
Yes, definitely. And the main characteristic of these success stories is cooperation with all partners and asking that everybody is doing what they can do best. But to work together, you have to share, of course, and that's very often a fear for people to share. I'm thinking, for example, of the country where the WAPES Executive Secretariat is located. It's in Belgium, and more specifically in the north of the country, in Flanders, where they have one system. And the Public Employment Service, the private agencies, the job seekers, the employers, everybody is using the same system. And that works very well. But then, of course, people must absolutely put their data in the system. And that's an issue for a lot of countries. But they found a solution for this. So now it's done. When you are speaking about the globalized world, we know all that there is a very big issue of diplomas. How to know that somebody coming from another country has the same level of what you are expecting as an employer. That's why the system is working not based only on diplomas, but mostly on competencies. And the job seekers are putting their diploma, but also the competencies that are according to this diploma, and other competencies, if they have some. Soft competencies, for example, or something that they learned when they were student, or anything else. For the employer, it's the same. They put the competencies, and sometimes they need something more, because the job changed. And if a lot of employers are putting a same new competence for the same overall job, there is an alarm system saying the job changed. Because one of the big issues with all these systems is how to keep them up to date. They are kept up to date by the employers and by the job seekers themselves. It works, of course, not perfectly, but it works very well. It's one of the nicest examples that I heard of from my members.
Very good. Annemarie, thoughts there?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I was thinking regulation, well, most, I would say, OECD countries have a proper regulation on our industry in place. It's a hygienic factor, but if you don't have it, we won't be there because we need it to establish properly. If the whole labor market is non-regulated, there's loads of informality, if there's no compliance, if wages are very low. We would love to help those countries, but the infrastructure simply is not right yet to move there. So that's the hygienic factor. Having said that, level 2, and what can help in setting those regulations is, of course, ratifying the ILO Convention on Private Employment Agencies, ILO Convention 181, which sets a proper framework for regulation. Then, moving on, what probably, if you look at the shifting world of work, where, and Lenka, you said it already, cooperation is of the essence. It's a sharing economy, and sharing, you can't share if you don't cooperate first. You have to know each other. What is also, and this is also for OECD countries, something that can be and should be improved more, is the cooperation between the world of work and the world of education. The world of education often still is very academic, very focused on delivering the highest academic grade, but not enough looking at the needs of business and the future needs of business. So cooperation between those worlds, to me, is one of the things we really need to get going more. And I hope that's, well, it's one of the things we should, I think, add to all of our agendas. Thank you.
Thank you. So as we finish up here, Anil and Sandeep, in the end, you guys have to run your businesses. You need access to the right talent. For the people in the room, what are the actions that they can be taking to allow you to better compete globally and get the talent that you need to run your business?
I think I would say, of course, a lot can be done on that side, but many times, when I look as a recruiter, from that point of view, many times it's, again, our mindset, which becomes a challenge rather than, the talent availability here or across the globe, or regulations or something, else that comes in the way. And, I can give, another couple of examples here. I was in, recruitment side of it, on the other side of the table, and one of the client once asked a candidate, we went through all rounds, and then they said, no, this guy isn't fit. And I said, why this guy isn't fit? Saying he is a sales job, he's a gray sales, gray cement salesman, and I'm looking for a white cement, salesman. So it can't be, more weird than we want. Many times, we look for absolutely perfection. On the other hand, we say, human capital is something which appreciates, people can learn, and all other aspects. In spite of that, we are, in our own mind, blocked. Second is this sequential way of, or a linear way of developing. So whether from education system, or as, now Skill India, etc., we are talking, people come in, they learn something that they get into. By that time, the earlier panel was discussing, maybe those jobs would, vanish by the time people are ready to do that particular job. And how can we, cut this particular thing out? As, another story day before, I think I was reading in Speaking Tree, where he said, a guy worked very hard for 12 years to learn the skill to walk on water. And he was boasting about it to a boatman, and he said, boatman asked him, how much time did it take? He said, 12 years. He said, why don't you just use the boat instead? Why did you spend 12 years to, try and learn a skill which can be done in a different way? So how can we find those ways where quickly, using technology or other resources and, fast forward that? So that's my view on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandeep?
Yes, so from an action point of view, from the recruiter side, I think I would look at three things to begin with. First is the attitude, because I think that is very important. So today we source a lot of CVs and get the people in place, and then we try and do a mix and match kind of a situation. But I think it is important that the people who go through the filters at various stages have the right attitude. Skills can be developed. It is attitude which probably needs, it is inherent to an individual. So from an action point of view, I think a lot of focus needs to be put in there. Second, the problem that we face is the ability to find the right man for the right job. So you have to go through hundreds of CVs to be able to pick the one that you actually require. So that is where I think I would put, from an action point of view, if technology, because today technology enables that, if the lead time between getting the right man for the right job in the manner that the customer so desires or the business so desires, if that is shortened, I think it will be a job very well done. So that is the second point, I think that is important from this thing. And the third is, we did talk of a lot of people going in for temporary assignments and stuff like that. So if there is a person who has been provided for a job, and God forbid he or she leaves, the lead time to replenish that, I think, needs to be much, much faster. So from an action point of view, I think these three things I would put forward as action that the recruiters and the people sitting here need to take.
Very
Thank you.
good. So as we look at capacity building for the federations, we heard some very candid feedback there. I think helpful, and frankly, as you travel the world and you talk to employers everywhere, I think those are very consistent themes. Educate me on the market, educate me the way that my peers are being more effective in what they're getting done, how they're finding access to talent, how they're retaining that talent along the way, how the agencies that are supporting, be they public or private, are making a difference, and certainly for the governments, how you can make it easier to work with everyone. So with that, I'd like to wrap up. I'd like to say thank you to this panel for sharing, and certainly look forward to getting questions from everyone out here as we continue the conversation over lunch and further into the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. It truly was a pleasure hearing to this session with such valuable insights being shared on the globalization of the workforce. Thank you so much once again for sticking on to the time schedule, and we would really like to present you a small token of appreciation, for which may I please invite on stage Mr. Premlesh Machama, Managing Director, Career Builder, India, to kindly come on stage and felicitate our esteemed panelists. Can we please have the mementos up on stage? I request Mr. Premlesh Machama firstly to kindly felicitate Mr. John Healy. Oh. All right. That was Mr. Sandeep being felicitated. Ms. Lenka. Mr. Dheeraj Kumar. John Healy. Ms. Annemarie Muntz. Mr. Anil Dhankher. And Ms. Linda Kromjong. Thank you so much. Can we please have a group photograph? Can you please step forward ahead of the tables so that we could have a group photograph? It's nice memory of Taj. Thank you so much. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to refuel ourselves. It's time for the lunch break, which is being served in the adjacent hall. And request all of you, please be back here on time, as it's a task for me to reassemble everybody back here and start this next session on time. We are scheduled to start our next session at 2:30, so it's a humble request to kindly be here 10 minutes before 2:30 so that we could start sharp on time. Thank you so much, and bon appetit. And yes, do remember to tweet in your comments at hashtag WEC India 2016 and hashtag Ciett 2016. Thank you so much.